quiet streets of Amityville, New York. A house stands on Ocean Avenue that looks like any other white clapboard, a neat lawn, and those half-moon windows high in the attic. From the street, it seems ordinary, but something happened there in 1974 that turned an ordinary house into one of America's most talked-about legends. On the night of November 13, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. left his bed and walked through his family home. By morning, 6 members of the DeFeo household were dead. Neighbors awoke to police lights and whispers. The town that morning felt smaller. A private tragedy had become a public shock. Investigators would later say the scene was still, almost as if the house itself had been holding its breath. Butch's life before that night offers some context without explanation. Arguments at home, tensions with his father, and a young man who seemed to be fraying at the edges. In interviews and court testimony, he offered different explanations, at times confessing, and at others suggesting darker influences. He would eventually be convicted, and the criminal chapter of the story closed in court. Yet practical, stubborn questions remained about how such violence could occur in a place that looked so ordinary, and why the household's last hours felt so strangely quiet to those who lived next door. A little over a year later, the house found new owners. George and Kathleen Lutz moved in with Kathleen's 3 children, bringing hopes of a fresh start. The price had been low, and to the family the house seemed like a bargain and a chance to rebuild. They could not have known that within weeks, their lives would tilt into an experience they would later describe as terrifying. At first, the Lutzes noticed small, unsettling things. Doors that had been closed found open, cold drafts in rooms with closed windows, and a family dog that refused to pass a certain threshold. George began waking at the same time, 3:15 a.m. every night, a time later linked in the public imagination to the DeFeo murders. Minor annoyances grew into persistent phenomena. Weird odors would hang in the air. Dark stains appeared and reappeared in places that had been cleaned, and objects shifted without explanation. The family's children began telling stories that no adult can entirely explain. Missy, the youngest, spoke often about a supposed friend called Jody, describing a figure with odd features and glowing eyes. Her descriptions repeated and stuck. Kathleen reported vivid nightmares, dreams, in which she saw scenes she recognized as someone else's memory, as if the house filtered images from other lives. On several occasions, Kathy said she felt herself rise from the bed and look down at her sleeping body. A priest was invited to bless the home. He carried a crucifix and holy water and spoke prayers. According to the Lutzes, as the ritual began, a voice deep and hostile was heard, and the priest left, shaken by a sense of presence he described as malevolent. Paranormal investigators arrived with meters, cameras, and notebooks. Some recorded unexplained fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, odd static bursts on audio recordings, and photographs with anomalies that could not be immediately dismissed. Guests who stayed late reported sudden headaches, a nausea that arrived without warning, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. Skeptics were swift and sharp. Journalists and independent researchers examined timelines, interviewed neighbors, and checked statements. They found inconsistencies in recollections and noted how sensational stories can coalesce around grief. Critics suggested environmental causes might explain some symptoms: mold, gas, or the psychological effect of sleeping in a place known for violence. Others pointed to incentives. Once a story attracts attention, media deals and book contracts can follow, blurring motives and memory. These were serious critiques, raising real doubts about some of the more dramatic claims. Yet the story refused to dissolve under scrutiny. Jay Anson's 1977 book, The Amityville Horror, turned a local incident into a national phenomenon, and the 1979 film adaptation etched certain images into the public mind: oozing slime, the midnight hour, red eyes in darkness. The house's quarter-moon windows became a visual shorthand for domestic terror. Tourists began to appear on Ocean Avenue. Cameras clicked, and a private home became a public stage. To understand why people were so captivated, look at the human texture beneath the headlines. 6 people were killed in that house. That fact anchors everything: the loss, the shock, the grief. Families mourned. Neighbors remembered. The Lutzes, whether their account was truthful, embellished, or influenced by external factors, were changed by what they said they had experienced. Their fear was real to them, and that emotional reality mattered to listeners and readers who judged it. Breaking down the Lutz experience day by day gives a sense of how a life can be worn down by cumulative events. Early nights were punctured by small alarms. The children woke frightened, simple items misplaced, the dog unwilling to enter certain rooms. By the second week, the mood shifted. George grew irritable, his calm thinning into near-obsessive behavior. Kathy began to sleep poorly and to report vivid, violent dreams. The children's tales grew more detailed, more insistent. The family's decision to invite priests and investigators came from desperation. When those interventions failed to restore normalcy, the Lutzes took the final, wrenching step. They fled in the middle of the night, leaving behind furniture, food on the table, the ordinary clutter of daily life. Police and medical records add another layer to the narrative. Detectives who processed the DeFeo case described a painstaking, often grim job interviewing neighbors, tracing timelines, documenting physical evidence. The courtroom later became a place of conflicting testimonies, confessions, retractions, claims of voices, and arguments over motive. The legal resolution, Butch's conviction, did not end the questions about the house or erase the emotional aftermath for those involved. As the Lutz story circulated through newspapers, magazines, and television, it hardened into collective images. Filmmakers and writers chose certain elements to emphasize. Dramatization thickened the tale. Cinema amplified fear through sound and light. Music that tightened like a fist. Camera angles that made ordinary rooms seem vast and empty. Once vivid on screen, those moments took on a life of their own and fed back into public memory. Over time, later occupants reported mixed experiences. Some found peace and normalcy. Others spoke little, preferring privacy to publicity. Certain neighbors wrote about odd smells or strange sounds, but the majority of the town continued everyday life. Renovations changed the house's appearance. The quarter-moon windows were altered, the facade repainted, the address disguised. Still, a steady stream of curiosity persisted: anonymous visitors, late-night radio callers, and documentary crews who wanted to know whether the house still held its secret. Beyond the sensational coverage, scholars and commentators began to study Amityville as a social phenomenon. Sociologists point to the way communities process tragedy. Psychologists examine memory, suggestion, and trauma. Cultural critics explore how markets turn real suffering into entertainment. These studies suggest that the Amityville story is not just about alleged hauntings. It is about how we collectively narrate fear and how stories can grow beyond their origins. In the end, the Amityville tale resists a tidy verdict. There is the indisputable tragedy of the DeFeo murders. There are the Lutz's dramatic claims and the witnesses who supported them. There are skeptics with counter-arguments that matter, inconsistencies to consider, motives to explore, natural explanations to test. And there is a larger cultural truth. Some events refuse to be contained. They ripple outward into books, films, and conversations, and in that rippling, the facts, the feelings, and the fictions intermingle. If you stand on the curb of Ocean Avenue today, you may see only an ordinary house. You may feel nothing at all. Or you may feel a small, inexplicable chill, the kind that makes you pull your jacket tighter and wonder what happened behind those walls. The house will not tell you which interpretation is correct. It only holds memory, wood and plaster, and the traces of the lives once lived there. The rest is human. Our attempts to explain, to remember, to make meaning out of loss. Perhaps that is the most unsettling aspect of Amityville. Not whether the house is haunted, but that stories once begun do not easily stop. They evolve. They feed new imaginations. They make places more than places. They make ordinary things into warnings. And until we can agree on what happened, the house on Ocean Avenue will remain a breathing, contested story, part history, part folklore, and all the more powerful because it sits quietly in a neighborhood where people still live their lives beside it.